Omar?
Hello everyone, I'm Omar with GNP Plus, based in Jakarta, Indonesia. It's good to meet with everyone, and yeah, hopefully I can participate actively despite the time difference between Brighton and Indonesia.
Well, we thank you both for coming to us at an untoward time for each of you. The next session is going to be from now until 3:30 and is going to cover regional focuses on what's been happening and what we want to happen. And it's going to be 10 minutes each for a presentation. And it'd be really helpful if we could try and stick to time as much as possible. And Omar, we're going to come to you first about Asia Pacific. And there's your slides are up. Excellent.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this opportunity. I would like to start by saying this is such a good opportunity for me to be involved in this work around HIV criminalization. As most of you know, this is one of the issues that we didn't talk a lot in this region. There's a lot of factors why it's not become like the one of the priority here. So I'm just grateful to be able to join this global network and learn and also try to ensure that whatever happened in this region will not left from our watch. So the objective of this mapping in Asia region, it's very basic. It's basically we want to provide update on HIV criminalization legal environment in this region. Again, given on a very minor scope of discussion that's happening around this issue. So I think this is a good opportunity to see what actually happened in this region. And then also we want to see and document if there's any prosecution cases in this region with regards to the HIV criminalization law. And then hopefully throughout this very limited study, we will be able to provide some recommendation for future work, especially for this network in the future in Asia. So this mapping process is, I would like to say thank you to Edwin and also Sylvia for all the support. We basically do some literature review with a very few existing documents on HIV criminalization in Asia. Most of the information is already there in GNP Plus HIV criminalization scan website, and also I do some review on advancing HIV justice to report, and also there are two UN paper or publication on this issue, which is not very up to date. The first one is from UNAIDS on 2012 about criminalization of HIV non-disclosure, and the more recent one is from UNDP Bangkok Regional Office, which talk about HIV and the law in Southeast Asia. And then after that, we do some sort of data collection using HIV Justice Network Research Tool, which is the online survey. We circulated this survey to local partners in 10 countries. And from the response we got on that online survey, we do two key informal interviews. One is in Bhutan, and also the other one in Sri Lanka. And after that, the plan is to analyze all the data and then start drafting a report. So this is a very short summary on what came out from the survey. This is, I guess, not. This is something that everyone probably would expect with the situation in Asia. As you see, out of these 10 countries, most of them have HIV criminalization. HIV transmission is criminalized under a lot of penal code in those countries. But I would like also to point out that some of this law, the penal code, was actually inherited from the British colony time, especially those in those countries where British was there to colonize them. I find out that a lot of penal code was dated back to 1800, so it's very old law that's still there. And also I wanted to point out that most of this law is not specifically on HIV transmission, but more widely as a infectious disease transmission, except in Indonesia at the provincial regulation or provincial law. As you know, Indonesia is having this decentralization government, so they will have like two types of law. One is the national law, and also the provincial government is authorized to develop their own law. So in some of the provinces in Indonesia, the provincial law actually criminalize intentional HIV transmission. And one other note I want to point out that in Vietnam, actually this HIV criminalization law was enacted under their HIV regulation dated to 2006. But again, even though there are or the law is existing, there is no cases has been reported, no prosecution has been reported in the last 3 years. However, the criminalization of key population is different story. This is what I want to actually bring to discussion in this meeting and also with this opportunity, I would like to say that this is something that actually has been talked a lot in Asia region when we talk about criminalization of key population. As you can see in the table, in all of the country, the key population is criminalized, and some of the in some of the country in China, India, Thailand, and Vietnam, that law, the criminalization applied to people who inject drugs, but not to same-sex practice. So this is what I can summarize from the survey. The second findings from the survey is I would like to group it as community responses. It is turn out that there is no existing community organization or group who specialize on HIV criminalization issues. As I said earlier, most of their work around HIV criminalization or key population criminalization is kind of like part of their bigger work. If you can see in the third point, if I just jump to the third point because this is actually related. Most of the respondents said that they do work around criminalization issue among key population as part of their current work with intersectionality towards discrimination in health setting. This is actually some interesting issues that I also wanted to discuss and also seek your perspective, whether this is something that can be part of the HIV Justice Network focus in the future, or if there's other approach that more appropriate in addressing these issues. I would like to also hear about that. But the interesting thing is most of the respondents expressed their interest to learn or to contribute and also to include HIV criminalization issues in their program. So this is something positive that came out from the survey, that actually if we have more efforts in terms of, bringing this topic to the surface, that's probably we will see responses from community, and we might also see a different, landscape or even updated situation and information with regards of this issue. Now, this is some of the thinking that I have right now in terms of way forward. I think capacity building activities for HIV criminalization issues is something that highly needed in this region, but we need to also tailor it with local context and priorities. And again, as I said earlier, I would think that HIV Justice Worldwide Network experience and expertise would be very useful to help addressing criminalization against key population in this region. I don't know, I have no idea how we should start, but I do believe with all the expertise we have in this network and also the experience, we would be able to come out with something. And the other important thing I want to highlight is I do believe at regional and global level, it is important to bring this issue into broader platform. One of the example I can think of is bringing this issue into a SDG platform. As you might know, next year in 2019, the SDG Progress Review will focus on goal number 10 and 16, which would talk a lot around issues of inclusion and equalities. And this is something, I think this is one of the opportunities that probably we can use in order to make sure that these issues is, integrated, is embraced in this whole development goals work. Because everything right now with the end of the MDGs and HIV become, only like one of the point under several goals. We need to make sure that all the systemic issues with impact to HIV response needs to be addressed adequately. I think that would be all for me. And again, thank you for the opportunity to share this work.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you a lot. Okay, I'm going to move straight on to Lynette for ORASA. Yeah?
I think we've shared.
You think we've covered that in the earlier session? Absolutely. Then we will move on to Francophone Africa. Cecile.
Yeah.
Just coming down.
Okay. So this is just this first slide is just a reminder of why HIV Justice Worldwide exists. I found it useful to put the presentation together. It's on our website. So we exist to shape the discourse on HIV criminalization, to share information, to network, to build capacity, to mobilize advocacy, and to cultivate a community of transparency and collaboration. So the idea of creating a Francophone network is to actually be able to implement those different objectives by creating a Francophone space specifically dedicated to HIV criminalization. And the idea is not to just for Francophone to stick together and remain isolated, but in fact, the idea is to connect activists in Francophone Africa that work on these issues, so they can share their experience, they can speak in their own language, exchange, etc. But they can also be is also to connect them to other activists that work around the world on this issue, and I think that's the very purpose of HIV Justice Worldwide. So that's the idea of the Francophone network. Right now, we've been able to have 20 members, 20 organizations joining officially HIV Justice Worldwide from 12 different countries. So you have Belgium, Burundi, Canada, so it includes both Francophone and Francophone Africa mainly. Cameroon, Côte d'Ivoire, Gabon, and on the other slides you'll see also Madagascar, Maroc, Niger, République démocratique du Congo, Senegal, Tunisie. And what is interesting in the members who have joined so far HIV Justice Worldwide is that it includes AIDS organization, but also organization working with women, or organization working with MSM, or also organization working on harm reduction, or at least starting to work on drug policy. So it's an interesting mix, and intersectionality is important for HIV Justice Worldwide. So I just wanted to point this out. And the number of organizations that has actually joined HIV Justice Worldwide officially is not reflective of the number of organizations of people that we've been reaching out, because in fact only those who joined HIV Justice Worldwide are those who got the authorization, for example, from the board to actually join the coalition, and also did the extra administrative step of filling yet another form to do it. So I just want you to know that through work that we've done on building this network, we've actually, and it's another slide, reached out to, we have more than 120 contacts identified through our mapping in 2017, and this is the work of Stéphanie Clévaz-Loranger, so important to recognize it. And we have many organizations who are connected, but have not yet joined the coalition. We have important resources in terms of people. So we have consultants in human rights and HIV that can be very helpful. Stéphanie Clévaz-Loranger, but also we identified someone called Christian Chimalenga, who is really great. And of course, Patrick Keba from UNAIDS, who's been a really leader on this issue. And then there are different lawyers that we've been reaching out, and who have participated as well. Some have participated to the training in South Africa, who are not officially part of the network because they are not part of an organization that can join. They are like individual, but they are there, and we can use them as well as a resource people. Some of the things that we've been doing to build to build a movement among Francophone, and especially Francophone Africa, first started with identifying the Francophone actors involved in HIV criminalization and doing a report on HIV criminalization in Francophone Africa. That report was launched in December 2017, and it was prepared by Stéphanie Cléval-Loranger and then finalized, and she did it on behalf of the Canadian HIV/AIDS Legal Network. And this report basically confirmed, and we knew that there are many HIV-specific laws in Francophone Africa. Many of them are overly broad. They pretend to criminalize intentional transmission, but the terms are much bigger than that, and it's much broader. It also confirmed that there have been in some countries laws that have been amended, or some laws have not passed as well. So there have been mobilization, and a successful mobilization in some countries. Another thing, so this we kind of already knew, but like the new things is there are countries where there is no HIV-specific laws, but we've seen prosecution. So in Morocco, for example, in Cameroon as well. So HIV criminalization happened in the region whether there is an HIV-specific law or no HIV-specific law. It's very hard to have precise information about prosecution. We've identified at least 11 countries where we think some kind of prosecution has taken place, but it's really hard to know how far it actually went, what exactly happened, at what stage of the process it may have been abandoned if it didn't go through the court system. Looks like in some country mediation by local organization was actually successful. We have identified 5 countries where we can find actual decision, including DRC, Cameroon, Morocco, I'm blinking, sorry. And interestingly, in at least 4 of the decisions that we've seen, cases were about women. And in one case in Cameroon, it was a woman sex worker who ended up being HIV negative at the end. Like the judge was like, maybe we should check her status. I was like, yeah, she was HIV negative. It kind of shows the impact of conviction. So that was the report, sorry. Then we presented it with Stéphanie at ICASA. In December 2017, we organized a side meeting, and so we brought some of with people who participated to the mapping and others, and that was when we kind of started to launch the idea of maybe beyond the report and the mapping, we could create a Francophone network. And so it's from there that we consolidated the network and then facilitated the participation of some actors to the training organized by ISAC and others. And another thing that we've done is that we created, so Sylvie has been very helpful on this, created a Francophone listserv, because the listserv of HIV Justice Worldwide is in English, so how do you create a space where Francophone can follow what's on it? So we created something that is very specifically Francophone, but I am doing the link to make sure that the information is this list is not isolated. So, for example, all the newsletter, I translated most of the information and sent it to the Francophone itself. Sorry, I'm lost. Okay, so what we are now planning to do, and that we have on our work plan for 2018 as part of HIV Justice Worldwide, so it's already funded, is to continue to build that network and share information through the listserv and make the link between English listserv, French listserv. But also to develop a resource, and we're talking about how there is few resources in French and or there are translation of English resources. So the idea would be to develop some kind of information sheet and arguments that are specifically developed for Francophone countries. So that's on our work plan for 2018. And then there are the resource kits that will be translated, and the media kit as well that we mentioned will be translated. And I'm hoping that maybe we could, I know that there is a webinar that is being organized in English around the launch of the media kit. And I wonder if something similar in French could be done when the translation is ready. We also planning to try to use international human rights protection mechanism, and I'm always interested in the conversation around the African Commission. Maybe this is something that we should do. To put the issue of HIV promulgation on the radar. Of course, contributing to Beyond Blame and making sure that the issue of in Francophone Africa and Francophone countries are being addressed at Beyond Blame, even though the conference will be in English only. And the promotion of the upcoming global consensus statement and how we can use this new network to promote it in the region and have endorsers from the region. And we also have this money that we can use to support local advocacy. So a big question is what initiatives do we want to support, can we support? And next, on Friday, I'm going to Francophone conference on HIV, and I'm going to meet some partners there, and I'm hoping that they may have some ideas on local advocacy effort that maybe we could support. And other possible activities that we have started to discuss with members of the network, and I want to put here, is trying to do something to provide additional support to Francophone lawyers. So they somewhere participated to the training, and they were super excited and grateful. At the same time, it's really hard to follow 3 days of training in another language with simultaneous translation. So could we replicate that training in Francophone Africa and bringing still like other people from outside, because again, the idea is to open, not to isolate. Do work with women living with HIV and feminists in the region. How can we build on the experience that you have in your region to do this work in Francophone Africa? There is also l'Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, which could be a useful forum. And then be better at promoting Francophone experience. So, for example, DRC, they just repealed their HIV specific law. Well, there is another HIV specific law in another law in DRC that is also problematic, but at least one of them has been repealed. And I don't think many people know about it and know how it happened. And so I think it would be great to record that experience and share it beyond just the Francophone community. Wow.
Great. Thank you very much, Cecile. Okay, do we have Svetlana?
No.
No?
No, Svetlana.
Shall we move? Shall we move on to Ferenc? Got your 10 minutes before?
Go for it. I'm not sure I have anything more to share than I will talk in the morning already.
Okay.
Because that's the.
We're getting ahead of ourselves with the.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I think maybe just one thought that is following up on what you said inside the previous session is that if you look at Western Europe, most of the countries are very close to the 1990 targets. So treatment as prevention and being uninfectious could be very valid in these countries, but then there comes those who cannot access treatment because they are migrants or because they don't have insurance, etc. So this is a very interesting thing that we should really focus on when it comes to Western Europe. And the other thing we talked about, the Central European states and the conditions they are in, and that could explode into anything, and we need to follow up. and be cautious.
Do we have? Who do we have?
Sasha says present on her behalf.
Yeah, I can try to present, because I know a bit about that work that Sveta was doing, so I can try if she can. I think it's because of the connection she can't get in. I'm also trying to reach her, but it doesn't work. So I can try, to present.
Okay, I need to open the presentation.
We're just going to open the presentation. Sasha, you're an absolute star for stepping in for people.
Well, I will just try, I wasn't making that research, but I just know.
Okay, well, we'll get it
from the ground. Just know some things from the ground, yeah, so we'll see.
Here we go.
Mm-hmm. Good, okay, so, well, in the very beginning, just a couple of words about that. Eurasian Women Network is a rather young organization, I can say, and that was very, what I heard from the girls working in the Secretariat, that they were very, very interested in that kind of work. The other thing, which is, I think, is interesting and remarkable, that I don't remember any organization before trying, to collect everything together and to analyze all the information. So it's also rather remarkable, step forward. So the network itself, well, I know a bit about it because I'm the person who is making strategic planning for that. So the leaders from all over the region are women leaders who works a lot in elimination of violence and in criminalization in key populations and other aspects. Basically, the network unite the women organizations or just single women activists from all over the region, and I can say that representation is rather great. So next slide, I think. So the purpose of the report and the aims were to analyze and accumulate the current data and to see what is the legal environment in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia. And Yevna was working in the partnership, but the thing is that every step of the report was devoted jointly and led by the women living with HIV. So it's only 7 countries that are focused. It's Belarus, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Moldova, Russia, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. And in a how to say, not in a full way, it's Tajikistan and Estonia. So they were part of the report, part of the data. Also there were 30 case studies collected, and the report is now available in English and Russian, and the interest and the plans of Yevna are to expand this report to the other countries of the EECA region, of course. Okay, next slide, please. So basically a couple of words about the methodology. It's community-based research, and so it is the broad review of existing information, and it was in development of the research and reporting tools for in-country community-based partners and media monitoring report systems. Next slide, please. So, because they have more information there. So basically it's, the mini grants were provided to complete the following activities on the in-country level. So it's community interviews, reviewing laws, legislation. It's documenting and data collection about HIV criminalization cases through informants, state legal records. Also, it's media monitoring. And it's also a database of organizations, experts that are providing legal support. So it was also analysis and further exploration of data collected, and of course in the end the drafting of final report and dissemination, of course. So. Briefly, records of data. So it's criminal courts, it's administrative offenses courts, it's official websites, it's websites and pages in social networks of NGOs, media outlets, and as well as the information just provided by the representatives of civil society organizations and responses, official responses of governmental bodies to the official requests that were written by activists and sent. And then the answers were also used to form this data. Next slide, please. So this report doesn't cover, you know, have some limitations. It doesn't cover to full extent the whole landscape of HIV criminalization in EECA region. Time and resource limitations. So there are some, you know, gaps in the information that was gathered. Well, I'm actually not. I think it's the most comprehensive report that ever was. I'm not. I disagree here with the presentation of Sveta, I can say. Well, I actually haven't seen anything like that before and after. Like, no, it's too modest of her to write like that. So of course it's not perfect, but I think it's the best of what was done during all the years I'm working in this field, and I'm working in this field already more than for 18 years, so it's like really good. So finally, the data was collected and then analyzed it, and the question of language is also now is raising more and more, because, you know, like the Russian is of course still the language which is speak all over the region, but in some countries it's already, you know, like the young people in Georgia already doesn't speak Russian, they rather speak English. So it's also changing a lot since the time of the Soviet Union, so it's also now becomes the issue. Next slide, please. So, the EECA region, it's 20 countries. And in general, EECA countries have strict and in some instances non-flexible laws pertaining HIV non-disclosure, exposure, and transmission. There are 15 countries now that have specific laws. And in 3 countries there are existing criminal laws to prosecute people living with HIV. All of the HIV specific laws in some form criminalize exposure or transmission. So criminal charges can be brought against the person living with HIV whether or not the partner or victim wish to proceed with criminal charges. So that is the main issue actually now in Belarus, because you don't need the person to apply, and it's the authorities who are making the cases. So in many cases, so that's basically it. The authorities are putting this crime ahead. Next slide, please. Well, maybe it's hard here to see, but you can see the list, you know, the countries. So like Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, or have specific laws, have non-specific HIV laws, and have cases. So Estonia don't have HIV specific law, but have non-specific laws and have cases. And like Georgia have the whole range, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia. So there is quite a lot. You know, Lithuania is the only country in Baltic that is in a better position. So we see like Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and the countries, Macedonia, some of the countries which are already, you could say, like in the European Union are in a better position. So, but even in the countries like which supposed and which the attitude which is very as for the progressive countries such as Ukraine, for example, also have HIV specific laws and have HIV non-specific laws and have cases. So it's not only, you know, there is such attitude inside the region that mostly such countries as Belarus and Uzbekistan are criminalizing HIV. Yes, of course, Belarus is a remarkable case, like, well, not saying remarkable, but very bad case. But this attitude, you know, this collecting of the data shows us that this attitude is not really true, you know, that the countries which are more liberal doesn't criminalize it's not true actually. Next slide. So in Russian Federation Criminal Code Article 122, now it's done. I remember the times when it was the same as in Belarus and Uzbekistan, where it was criminalized totally. Now in Russia it is that if you inform, it doesn't mean that that you will be how to say that? Sorry, that you will be taken to court for that. But in Belarus and Uzbekistan, it's actually the old Soviet form of the law, which says that it doesn't matter. Have you informed or you haven't informed? So it likes any kind of transmission is criminalized and can be applied by the authorities. So they initiate the case. So you don't need the person who will initiate the case. It could be the authorities, and that's exactly what is going on in Belarus. So the thing is that just a second, forgot the word. So the investigative committees, they just find a good way to open and close the cases and make good statistics of solving the cases. So it's very easy. They just come to the AIDS center, ask for information, then they compare the dates and see that, for example, the husband was registered in the AIDS center before the wife. It means that he have transmitted the HIV to wife. It means that they initiate the case and then brought them to the court, and then the husband is in prison. So that's it. Basically, very easy for them to work on that and to close the cases and to make very good statistics. So the thing is with Belarus that the law was not used for a long time. So it existed for more than 10 years, like it was there, but no one was using them. And then suddenly the investigative committees started to, and the police started to use it. And this statistics is for the first half of the 2017. The latest one for Belarus is 130 cases, and 100 of cases is for Koman Oblast.
Wow.
So also what is remarkable I can say about this report and this work done is of course gender lens, because usually also more pressure on women in the use of this legislation, and a lot of violence based on the threats is going on. So it's very reported information from the women organization, both human rights and organizations of such key populations, for example, as women IDUs or women sex workers, because HIV in that case became the one more source of threat, of violence and pressure that is very frequently used. So yeah, I think, yeah, well, that's basically it.
Okay.
If you have any questions, guys, what I can answer, I will try to.
Okay. I'm just going to check. First of all, thank you very much, Sasha, and give our thanks to Svetlana as well, because that was really helpful. I'm just going to check whether we have Diego. No. Okay, so we can go on to general discussion, but if Diego manages to join us, then we will stop the discussion and go to him. Richard.
Thank you for that. I had a question of clarification about the report from Belarus. You said that in the first... Oh, do we have...
Svetlana is joining us.
Света, я представила твою презентацию. I've made your presentation, my friend.
Oh, perfect.
But now we can tell you in person that it was a good presentation, and we thank you very much.
It was a great presentation, and the research and the results are amazing and eye-opening and so important, so thank you.
Yeah. But now we are on questions, and Richard has a question for you.
Yeah, so you mentioned 50 cases in the first several months of 2017 in Belarus in one particular region. And first question is to clarify whether those were 50 cases newly discovered during that period or 50 cases that actually arose during those few months. And if it's the latter, that is 50 cases actually arose during those few months, which seems like an awful lot, I wonder if you have any insight into what resulted in that. Was it a cluster of people that somehow sort of got investigated progressively in layers by police? Was it there's one or two prosecutors or police who really have an obsession with sort of seizing this and demonstrating something? Is it something more? Maybe a combination of those kinds of factors. It'd be interesting to know what has driven that outbreak of prosecutions, if in fact that's what you were describing.
Sorry, I didn't get your questions.
I can try to jump. It is about what were the factors why it was such a blow in Belarus? Why it was so? I can try. As I was talking.
It's for me. It's hard to understand the mentality of what in their mind and what provokes such as attention to HIV transmission. And you can see that, for instance, in Gomel Oblast, it's very huge number of cases. I have no such an explanation. And also, maybe it also contributed by a big attention from mass media, because they like draw a lot of attention to this issue in society. It was like, oh, it's sensation, and also it's like we're trying to do some kind of visibility or fighting with HIV and AIDS. So like safe fight with HIV epidemic by more punishment against people living with HIV. So it's hard to say how it was work in Belarus. Maybe we need more consultation with local people, and they can explain what the reason, what the background for this.
Okay.
I can add a bit. What the people also are saying is also depends on the prosecutor office, actually. So they just find this way to get good statistics, you know, of new cases done, and that's the one thing. The other thing is that it's in Gomel Oblast also the level of understanding and literacy, legal literacy from the side of people living in HIV is very low. So they actually were blaming themselves. So they were given information in such way that it was very easy, you know, to make these cases and to prosecute it. So one of the things we were talking with the activists from Gomel and from Belarus was that they really need also a lot the legal literacy for people, so that they won't put the blame on themselves by themselves. So it was number of factors, and it still is. So you can see, like, you know, in Minsk, where the level of education is like higher and understanding is higher, it's not happening. And also it's the way of the like opening and closing the cases, how the prosecutor office is working. So they now are also working in country with the prosecutor offices a lot. So first they started to work with the investigations committee, but the investigations committee point them to the prosecutor office and said, okay, it was their initiative. So now they are mostly involved with them. And trying to close case by case, close them and help the people who are inside of all that, provide them lawyers and things like that. But entirely the whole picture, to change the whole picture, it will take time because now they are just initiating to start to discuss that inside the Belarusian parliament. And now the main question is, will this discussion happen during the spring session, or will it happen during autumn session? So now activists are trying to get it earlier on this session, this discussion. The Rathangs got some, well, there was done a big work with media. So now there are some, you know, journalists who are more supportive, and the cases were awful. Like, you know, the kid is staying alone because the mom is taken to prison. So the cases were like really ugly. And yeah, so basically now it's, you know, also the matter of time, because all this parliament machine is moving very slow.
Okay, I have Ferenc and then Raoul, and I would like to remind everyone, if you can ask questions or make observations on any of the presentations that we've had this afternoon, so please just plunge in. And for the people who are on Zoom, you can use the chat box to ask questions, and we will get told of them. Ferenc?
Yes, just a general comment on what Sasha was saying about this certain person in a certain district of Belarus which generated these cases. And it reminded me of the Czech Republic, that this law that was used a couple of years ago against 30 people suddenly has been there for years or decades. It's the same in Belarus. So it shows the vulnerability of these existing laws, that they can be put into practice at the time.
Yeah, I think that's worth highlighting for many countries that have got laws that they're just hoping nobody notices.
Yeah, so I think it's particular for Belarus, but also for other countries, the suspicion is that the origin was not necessarily HIV specific, but more the legal system and the pressure on the prosecutors and the police system to solve cases, basically. And once this was found as an easy way to get a lot of results from a legislative sort of point of view, that sort of spiraled out of control. And I think because it's not only HIV specific, because there's also TB cases, other public health issues that were brought to other key populations that were suddenly under sort of a magnifying glass that resulted in sort of additional attention in a negative sense. And for HIV, then the sensationalism in the media then results in it spiraling out of control and getting even more attention, and then becoming a sort of a vicious cycle. So I think why this is relevant for Belarus, it's obviously almost now irrelevant what instigated it, because it's too late. It's already, the cycle's already started. But it is relevant for other countries, particularly in this region, but also beyond the region and in other regions, how to use the tools we have around sensitizing media to nip it in the bud and prevent it from spiraling out of control.
Mianko?
My question, I think the UNAIDS country office for Belarus drew attention about the situation going on in Belarus, but I haven't heard much about Armenia. They said that something is also happening there, so I haven't seen that in the report. If you do know what's happening, whether it's the same situation or no, nothing yet.
I don't have I'm in close touch with Belarus, but I don't have a lot of information about Armenia, being honest.
Yeah, because I know there is a provision in the criminal code as well, probably similar to the one in Belarus, but possibly not have it skyrocketed yet, or that.
Well, I totally agree with Raul, actually. It's easier to work on the prevention of that situation, on changing the laws before that machine is already going on. Because when it's already, prosecutor office who is working on that, and investigation committees are working on that, so it's very hard to stop that. And you have to work every case by case, and it's a lot of energy, and it's much more easier to work on the prevention stage before that started. And actually the experience is teaching us that we have to pay attention before. And it really can, and all the countries which have this in their legislation are actually on fire, because tomorrow it can be the same situation. Very unsafe and very dangerous situation.
Okay, Edwin.
Yeah, so I'd like to thank everyone who's presented on all the regional work, for doing the work, and also for, of course, presenting on it. And I wanted to ask each of you, because you've each highlighted different aspects of HIV criminalization and different recommendations and different countries where it might be an issue. What we can do as the HIV Justice Worldwide Coalition to help support a particular country, or in fact a broader region, this year and even moving forward into our next work plan and funding cycle. Because it feels to me like one of the things that is really obvious is that the more we look for problems, the more we're finding them. And we don't want, at the same time, it feels kind of overwhelming, actually, to hear that even in one single country, for example, Belarus, that by the end of the year, you have 100 and some, was it 170 cases? I'm shocked. I'm just completely shocked. But I'd like to get a sense of whether you think, for example, for Ika, whether looking at Belarus and as Mianka says, maybe Armenia too, are they the two countries that we really need to focus on, or do we also need to highlight that Russia, continues to have huge amounts of prosecutions, but perhaps has a political machine that's even more difficult to deal with? Although they did say they were going to be revising their law. At the beginning of last year, Russia announced it was revising its HIV criminalization law. And do you have any information about that? The same for Omar and Asia Pacific. I noticed you highlight that you're not aware of prosecutions in the countries you've looked at so far. But China, I know, has had a number of prosecutions. They've even published on the use of phylogenetic analysis in their prosecutions. And I worry the more we look, the more we'll find. But is there any point in even trying to make a change in China where there may be some low-hanging fruit in another Asia-Pacific country that we could focus on? And the same for Francophone Africa. Where can we actually focus our limited resources, and where would we like to have the most impact?
Yeah. So tactically, where is a quick win, and where are the tough cookies that need long-term work? Could we perhaps ask each of the presenters to have some response to that? Omar, are you with us?
Yes, I can start responding to Edwin's comments and question. I think in the case of China, I know this is something that's probably missing from the survey or the study that's been done in this region. But I do believe if the situation in China is already, coming up to later stage, meaning there's already has been prosecution. I think in terms of responses from HIV Justice Network, we probably need to think on how we provide some sort of a support in terms of legal aid. We probably want to seek or to explore a partnership with some legal organization, a legal aid organization, or some lawyers club in China who might be interested in providing support for this issue. But for other countries, like I highlighted in the findings, I do believe that we need to, as I mentioned, build their capacity in terms of providing knowledge and information on how this situation can lead up to in terms of PLHIV community. And then once the community have, some sort of level of understanding on how this might impact to the PLHIV community, we need to start to work on advocating to, those law were there, but it's never used due to some factors. So we need to start advocating to, revoke that law. If it's not being used, if it's impossible to use, then we need to start voicing out that there is no need to have this law in place. So I think that's two things that might be considered on the future work of HIV Justice Network. But again, this is something that's very new to me personally. So I would also like to hear others' perspective on how we should address this issue for Asia region. And another additional thing, I exclude Pacific, which meaning I'm not looking at Australia at that time, because the whole situation is completely different. I believe Sally, who's based there, already, and there is some work already been done for HIV criminalization issues for Australia. So this is something that I just wanted to flag.
Thank you. Any of the other presenters from regional networks have any comments to make on this?
So I had made some suggestions as to how we could of activities such as replicating the training for lawyers. So I'm not going to go back to those. In terms of support to some specific local advocacy, I guess it's not for me to tell, so I hope to be able to get more information from the local partners on what they want to do. But what comes to my mind is Ibrahim Kassoum from Niger, who I think has been identified as a champion on HIV immunization. He's very motivated, and he's so they've already had a reform of their legislation in Niger, but it did not fully decriminalize HIV, and they want to go further. They say that the fact that people living with HIV, especially women organizations, were not really made aware of the consequences of HIV immunization has been an obstacle to full decriminalization. And so I think they want to take another go at repealing the legislation through another criminal code broader reform. And he just mentioned to me that they are creating a national coalition against HIV immunization. So I wonder if this is something that we could support, and maybe there is some, also we have all experiences of creating this kind of coalition. So that could be an idea. I know that in what the report also showed is that in République Centrafricaine, there was a project to amend the legislation, and it's supported by UNAIDS, but it looked actually quite concerning in terms of the provision. And so this it might be good to follow up and on this and see if we could provide any technical assistance with this project. And how to say
Central African Republic.
Yes, Central African.
Car.
Yes. And then we've seen. Voilà. So I think it could be a good place to do some. I trust that he would be interested.
Yeah.
If he's not, he will be shortly.
Well, you have to take your chances where you find them.
You will actually be in the middle of it.
Yeah. Any
Those
other?
are just ideas, and of course, I think a local advocate would know better. But that's just kind of me what I identified as a possibility.
I am wondering whether there would be any value in some sort of paper actually looking at how some of these cluster, it's almost epidemics of prosecution. Maybe we need a paper, how to survive a prosecutorial plague.
The epidemiology of prosecutorial plagues.
Yeah, but actually looking at, because they're not all the same, but they have similar characteristics. And we've been talking about the Czech Republic and about Belarus. There was an earlier sudden rush of attempted prosecutions in Greece, which were linked to sex work and migration. And actually that was far more unsuccessful, as it turned out, but it shared a lot of the same features of expected easy wins by police and law people, exploitation of public ignorance, failure of the public health system to step in and do anything about it, media panic. And I think if we could identify some of these things, it might help people to mitigate some of them in future instances of this. That might be something to bear in mind.
It's the complicity of the public health system actually is the commonality.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think there's multiple sides to it, right? To documenting this. One is how to. It's almost like how to survive a plague 2.0 in terms of providing how do we support the people being prosecuted in the best way possible, but also how do we prevent it from happening in other countries, and how do we do no harm, in the sense of how do we make sure that raising the attention actually doesn't sort of spark the interest of certain media that then are against us. And I think it's particularly interest given the countries that are transitioning out of traditional donors support, which is again of particular interest for the ECA region, where there's a lot of countries currently already transitioning. So there's a greater sort of pressure by the government to basically stop services to certain populations, which puts them at greater risk already in terms of access to services. And one way to stop access to sort of come up with an excuse to stop providing services is through prosecution, as we know. So yeah, it's an additional reason to pay extra attention to transitioning countries.
While we have a second breather, I would just like to say welcome to Seth. You've finally made it. Have you brought us all presents from Iceland?
Oh, I have some chocolates.
I wasn't expecting that answer. I'm sorry, Svetlana, Sasha, Omar and Kenny, you will have to have virtual chocolates.
So I have a quick question, if I may.
Yeah.
You know, further to the presentations from the regions, I'm wondering if there is, or there are efforts at regional level, at least, to, in a consolidated manner somewhat, to support lawyers who are defending those being prosecuted, and with a view primarily, right, of course, to support the accused persons as they go through prosecution, but also with a secondary aim of educating the courts, because oftentimes, and I'm speaking anecdotally here, it might be easier in some contexts to begin to get the jurisprudence to shift in courts. And oftentimes, even when the prosecution does happen, some of the arguments in favor of the defense goes into the records of the court and make it easier for a judge who is looking at prosecutions within the same country or within the same region to possibly do something with some of those arguments. So there's a supporting the accused persons, but there's also the developing the jurisprudence of the courts, either through the defense platform or direct work with judges and the judiciary.
Any responses to that?
So, I mean, I'm hoping, Kenny, that actually that's something that we can work with UNDP to do that. Obviously, you do great regional work. I'm certainly aware of the work you're doing in Africa and I think Latin America, Caribbean. Are you working much in the Eastern Europe and Central Asia or the Asia region?
Not with the judicial dialogues, as far as I know, but certainly something we can work on. There are lessons to be learned from the other regions where these kinds of interventions with the judiciary have been going on for years, and it's certainly an area we can work on in the other regions as well.
Excellent.
Okay, that's really handy.
Yeah, I'm just curious if the extent to which in any of these regions, people who've been prosecuted have been not just supported in their case, but nurtured into becoming more public advocates. You know, to me, the turning point in the U.S. in terms of really getting advocacy underway was when 3 or 4 people were willing to go public who had had this experience themselves. And I think of a woman from New Zealand whose name I don't remember Louis Gay in Norway, or Rosemary, people who have kind of become symbols of efforts within their own countries, and how incredibly powerful that is. And certainly with the individuals in the US, none of them, I think of, were like advocates. They weren't expert in the law. They were just, this horrible thing happened to them, and it took a lot of effort to get them to the point, and the ones who were interested and able to do that. But it's just so efficient in attracting attention to the issue. And I wonder if there couldn't be maybe a more focused effort around that to identify spokespeople who can speak from that personal experience.
Has anyone else tried that?
Not yet. Okay, in Canada, but not.
I would say my concern would be that the legal environment in some of the regions we're talking about is not conducive to people sticking their neck out at this point, particularly if they're already a member of another key population that's criminalized or marginalized. And perhaps that's the difference between what's been able to be achieved in with advocates. I mean, you mentioned Norway, New Zealand, Canada, US. There's a commonality of, at least, whilst of course the environment's becoming more punitive, it's still that I think there's a sense of safety, perhaps.
I understand that there's certainly validity to that, but it's also, Robert Suttle, has been so incredibly effective. He comes from the part of the United States that has the highest rate of incarceration of not just young black men in the United States, but one of the highest in the entire world. That was certainly courageous, but he had support and training to do that and to make that somewhat safer for him. I don't want to just assume or minimize the risk to the people who've done that in those contexts, even in places like the U.S., which is so different.
But I think there is a general point to take out of what you're saying, which is absolutely true, and certainly, again, in the UK as well. Human stories often have more impact than abstract arguments about human rights.
And they don't happen by accident.
Yeah.
Because it took, a whole different kinds of support to get those individuals to the point where they were safe and comfortable enough and knowledgeable enough to be able to speak to the media or before a group.
But maybe we can look at different ways of storytelling for different situations where people do or don't feel safe. So.
I just wanted to add that in Australia, I've found that in fact AIDS councils and PLHIV organisations have, it would be wrong to say actively resisted because I haven't tried to get all of them, but people are very hesitant whenever there's been any discussion about anyone who's been accused or convicted. And I don't know whether that is because people tend to be scared of anything to do with the law. There's this really odd thing that, it's the law, you can't go near it, like you're interfering in a trial if someone's been convicted or found not guilty or whatever. Somehow it's all hands off. Or if there's an element of wanting to do the good gay citizen, the good person with HIV, so to not associate with that. So I think there's some, even in Australia, some capacity building amongst the do-gooders working on HIV to explore that area of supporting people. Just supporting people who've been through trials would be a great start, but supporting them to become advocates would be fantastic.
And some of those tools are universal, right? Some of how you do the nurturing and how you provide that support from sort of almost transitioning from one side of the spectrum to becoming an advocate. That type of support and how you do it and documenting how it's been effective in the US could be translated and transferred to other settings just as well. So that for me, this really strengthens another value of linking the different experiences.
And in the US, it started with the videos. It didn't start with putting people in front of an audience or talking directly to the media. It was letting them tell their stories and editing that into videos that personalized it, which probably could be done if there was specific support for that.
And it doesn't have to come from the national network.
Yeah. And also those things can become international, those stories. Yeah. Cecilia.
Yeah, and in Canada, that's also what we've done. We've done a film on women in HIV criminalization that includes the voice of a woman who was criminalized, and but her face is the confidentiality is preserved the way it was done.
We just produced an audio piece that I will flip to you as well.
And we also, yes. You want to mention that?
I'll send it around.
You send it to me or to the whole group? Me and more, I have a general kind of comment or question or need for guidance on how to work in countries where the explosion has not happened, may never happen. What do we want to do? How do we want to support people? How do we do it in a way that do not create that explosion? Where we can't really use people, we don't have advocates, potential advocates from people who have been prosecuted because it did not really happen. There haven't been cases or very few. What's our strategy there?
I would say that by examining how these explosions have happened, we can come up with some key features. Like we know that we need to try and influence the media, for example. We know that it's helpful to have tried to do some education with the legal system. We know that it's helpful to have defence lawyers, at least one, ready and educated when these cases start to come along. And I think by examining where it's happened and what the key features are, we can then produce, if you like, preventive strategies for countries where it hasn't happened, which I think largely we probably already know, but it's a question of what the priorities are within all the different things that we can do, especially where people are short on resources, short on people who are campaigning on this issue, to be able to say, these are the couple of things that I know I can do in my country that might mitigate some of this from ever happening.
Just to add a little bit, in the preventive toolkit or something, also take into account the political context of the region itself, because there might be regions where there hasn't been a trend, so the issue has been very quiet, not addressed. So not certainly preparing the lawyers and the judiciary is important in any situation, but at the same time not stirring things where problem has not arisen yet. Yes, and then prioritizing countries where a very neighbor has already gone into the spike of violence or something like that.
Because even if you train, the judges, for example, it might give them some ideas. Like how do you ensure that you're training them and
judges
and not just informing them of this new way of
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. There's I think we need to spend some time. I mean, perhaps it's the kind of thing that UNAIDS or UNDP could convene an expert meeting on how to do this, because it's actually, it's not just about it. It could actually be about broader issues and how to intervene in human rights related, issues. I just also wanted to ask, she's left. Oh no, I was just going to ask her. But I can ask Sasha, because the ECA report also has these fantastic not fantastic, really terrible case studies. And we were talking about, when you read the case studies, it really does humanize the real issue and particularly the impact on women of HIV criminalization, which of course there's a commonality in other parts of the world too. And so again, I mean, just bearing in mind Sean's excellent suggestion about ensuring that the voices of people who have been impacted by criminalization are heard, we do need to figure out how do we do this in a way that doesn't harm people. But I think we know that stories are the way to parliamentarians' hearts, the way that the media like to cover things. It's always about individuals. We're just writing an editorial after the Johannesburg meeting, and it's been changed so that it starts very much with the personal story of someone, and that personal stories are it. And we need to think of ways to tell stories about people that honours their experience, but obviously doesn't put them at risk. And obviously we've been using video for a long time, and we can continue to do so, although there are risks and there are costs about video, and we just need to think about different ways to be able to tell the stories. So I think we need to collect all those stories in some kind of compendium as well. Probably in Advancing HIV Justice 3, we will be able to pull together a lot of those stories in print.
I would remind you, we are officially heading into the break right now, but I have Richard, I have Nick, and then I have Oratile, and that's it. Okay, Nick?
Nick was for Sasha.
Okay.
We can't hear you.
Hang on.
You have to unmute.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Good. I don't want to break the break, but talking about, like this trends, the thing is that, what I think about EECA region, because I'm mostly aware about this region, is that there are so many, other things on the plate, even talking about the people living in HIV networks and community organizations, because the region is in the transition and there's a huge lack of treatment. And so that sometimes these issues of criminalization is just not prioritized enough inside the community. So that's one of the things. A lot of important things were said, but that's what I wanted also, to add, because I think this is one of the key things. Because having such a huge list on the agenda, the focus sometimes is when we have such for terrible cases as Belarus, it immediately raises up in the agenda. But while everything is not, on the stage when these laws does exist, but are not used, for example. People have millions of other things, like stockouts, no treatment for several months for several regions, it doesn't seem to be the priority. So it's also the part of the work to prioritize. And the other thing I wanted to share and to discuss with you, for example, for our region, very good works the competitive thing, like look at the Belarus, because the countries, they really inside the region, they like this kind of competitions. They want to report beautiful reports to the UNAIDS board. They want to be the good ones, the best ones. So that's the other advocacy opportunity that we have. But definitely, I think that the region needs a regional campaign about the criminalization to raise this issue up in the agenda.
Yes, there's nothing like country rivalry to act as a lever. Final word.
Yeah, this has all been quite mind-blowing hearing, how significant this issue is. I mean, I came here with that expectation to really get a good sense of how this is a big problem. One way to answer your question was about really kind of promoting the alternatives to criminalization, because we know criminalization is a use of law to control behavior. It's meant to be, at least originally, meant for, it has a health purpose, but we seem to have, it's now has cross purposes, because right now it's being used for a very different objective. Prosecutorial purposes are very much at odds with what is required. So I think the complicity of our public health system, we need to go back. And I think that is, for me, I'm trying to find the intersections, and for me that's the intersection. That's the first thing, is the real way that we can amplify responsibility by our ministries of health and of justice to really take on this issue as key, because they're responsible for it. I think also linking it, making sure that we're diversifying the conversations and the stories beyond just people living with HIV as being at risk of HIV criminalization, and also in it from a prevention point of view. People who are not living with HIV are equally at risk. So young people who are, you know, who are vulnerable to HIV infection, trying to diversify that conversation so that it's not kind of only just about people living with HIV as being at risk. It's also, it's a prevention issue that is everybody's issue, so that it doesn't kind of stigmatize and target, you know, and we get more leverage from more people. And as you've been talking about, you know, we're talking about it at the ends of it. We're talking about once we get to court, but the community movement building, the literacy across the board at community level is really, really key and really important as a way of preventing cases from getting to court.
Okay. I'd like to thank everybody, our speakers in particular, but also everybody else for an incredibly rich session, which has thrown up quite a lot of ideas. I can see Edwin's head sort of going, and we'll be back in 25 minutes.